we come to it, let me ask you a question. How do you cope with rejection? Right? Maybe you remember when because the answer for most of us in here is not right well, right? I'm just looking around at the faces, and I know that anyway. But you think back to when you were a teenager. You're wondering about asking that lad or that lass out. Flipping heck. That was scary, right? They might reject you. I'm not going out with a minger like you. Right? That's scary. Think about our friends. When we start to make friends, we're worried about whether they will like us. We're worried about whether they'll reject us if we be ourselves. With our family. Might there be something, a truth we've got that if we open up to our family about it, even our family are going to reject us? Maybe as we think about sharing the gospel with people, one of the main reasons we're worried about sharing the gospel with people is because they think we're weird. They'll not talk to us or refuse to have anything to do with us. And in all those situations, whether it's because you're not very good looking or because you're not like the life and soul of the party, or whether it's just because you're sharing the gospel, how do we cope when we've tried our best and others don't want to know? Jesus is showing us here in this passage, he's continuing on from lots of the things Matthew's continuing on from lots of the things he's been saying in chapter 12 so far about how the Pharisees are rejecting the Lord Jesus. And Jesus is showing us here, Matthew's opening up for us here, that the way to deal with rejection in any of these forms is to trust God, to keep gently showing people Jesus, and to love one another through it all. Now, hearing that, you might think, we've got 3 points. No, we haven't. We've only got 2. Just, to be the same as always. But here's the first one, right? And we'll spend much longer on the second one, I think. But here's the first one. It's kind of linked into everything we've been talking about in chapter 12, particularly so far, but it's really clear here. Matthew says, Jesus tells us, if we want to follow Jesus, we've got to expect rejection. Like kids, do you ever ask that question of mum and dad? Why? You can't do that. Why? Don't do that. Why? 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 And then mum and dad come up with the answer that parents think kills all arguments. Because. Or because I said so. Or because I'm your mother. Or whatever, right? As we get the answer back in our house sometimes. That's not an answer. It clearly is. But this is the Pharisees now, right? Throughout chapter 12, Jesus has been showing them himself and speaking the gospel into their lives. And they've been going, why? And Jesus finally, it's almost like here he hits the limit, right? He says, because you should already know. Because look there at verse 38, then some of the Pharisees and teachers of the law said to him, Teacher, we want to see a sign from you. Now, it's fairly obvious that they're not actually after a sign. They're not actually after kind of fuel for the faith, isn't it? Because if you want to know why they've already seen enough signs, just go back and look at all the miracles that Jesus has done through the last few chapters. Go back to the sign that he showed John the Baptist when he said, look, everything from Isaiah 61 and all the other prophecies is coming true. They're not actually after their sign. What they want is they want Jesus to do a magic trick so they can say, as they've said in the last time, it's only because of the devil. You're a nut job. They want in evidence to get rid of Jesus. Their hearts are cold and dead and lifeless and turned in on themselves. They don't want to hear Jesus. And that's what Jesus says, isn't it? He answered, verse 39, a wicked and adulterous generation asked for a sign, but none will be given except the sign of the prophet Jonah. We'll look into the details of what he's saying in a minute, but essentially he's saying, you've had all the signs you need. You're only asking because you've turned away from worship of the Lord and his Messiah, like those people in Psalm 2 who rage against the people. You just become like the nations who rage against the Lord and against his anointed one. I'm not going to give you any more signs. I'm not going to pander to your selfish sinfulness. Because look at Jesus' argument there. Verse 40, as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the huge fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. We can all do that, right? He's saying, look, I'm pointing you forward. Jonah was in the fish and then came forward with good news to the people of Nineveh, right? Jesus is going to die on a cross, be buried in the ground for 3 days, and then he's going to rise again and bring new life to all these people, right? He's like, you need to trust in me. That's it. That's the sign. That's the only sign you're getting. If you are not a Christian this morning, you are going to hell because of your rebellion against God. But Jesus has lived and died and risen again. And if you put your trust in him, that he has taken your punishment, you can know that forgiveness. You can know that new life. You can know that hope. Only your heart, which rejects Jesus, keeps you from coming. Will you ask the Lord to soften your heart and bring you to himself? You see, Jesus says, that's the sign, guys. I'm going to die, I'm going to rise again, just as the Old Testament has shown. And the people in the Old Testament got it right. Nineveh, Assyria, that was the capital of Assyria, Israel's worst enemies, this empire that crushed Israel. They got it. The men of Nineveh will stand up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, for they repented at the preaching of Jonah. And then he says the Queen of the South, that's the Queen of Sheba. If you read back, the Queen of Sheba came to visit Solomon. She was this rich queen, probably from Africa, and she came to visit Solomon because she was so amazed by his wisdom and wealth, and she came to listen to him. She came and saw the wisdom of God that was there in Solomon. But Jesus follows both of those up, doesn't he? In verse 41 and verse 42, he says, Nineveh repented and Queen of the South repented, and now something greater than Solomon is here. It's not someone greater just. Did you notice that? It's something greater. And we've actually heard this phrase before, back in verse 6. Do you notice that when they're talking about the temple of something, the Sabbath and the temple and that? He says, I tell you that something greater than the temple is here. So Jesus says, as he's come as the Messiah, something greater than the temple is here. You know, where the priest, and in fact in the context of verses 5 and 6, Jesus is talking about the priests serving in the temple. So something greater than the priests in the temple is here. Something greater than the prophet Jonah is here, verses 39 to 41. And something better than King Solomon is here. Do you see our areas pricking up? The priests, the prophet, the king. All come together in the one who is the prophet, priest, and king. God's Messiah, God's Saviour. All found in the one who is the suffering servant of Isaiah that we looked at in verses 17 to 21 a few weeks ago. The one who will establish justice in the earth. Jesus says, look, all the signs are there. You don't need any more. The Old Testament, which you say you're masters of, shows that I'm the Messiah. And therefore, they're actively choosing to reject Jesus as they have been throughout. We've seen that, for example, in verses 24 to 32, haven't we? They're just rejecting Jesus, saying he's of the devil, refusing to trust him. But they still think they can sort their lives out by themselves. Look at verse 43. When an impure spirit comes out of a person, it goes through arid places seeking rest and does not find it. So Jesus is saying, I'm going around casting out demons, right? So you think, like, the demons come out. But then verse 44, don't get too far into the metaphor. You know, we don't need to imagine this demon wandering around the desert looking for, you know, a spa to go and buy his tinnies at, right? But Jesus casts this demon out, but the person in this picture doesn't then accept Jesus. And so perhaps this person's had this demon cast out, and then they've tried to sort their life out by being disciplined, by trying to obey God's commandments, by trying to not be a nasty person. And therefore, when the demon arrives back at the house, the person, it finds, verse 44, the house unoccupied, swept clean and put in order. You know, one of those houses that lots of people like to have, where it looks like nobody lives in it, you know? And so he says, right, great. There's no mess in this house. Me and my mates can come and have a party. And do you see what Jesus is saying here? He's actually thinking we can sort ourselves out without Jesus actually puts us in a worse position. Because our own self-righteousness kills us more than a knowledge that we're messed up. Because we think we're good enough without God. You know, it's like the joys of trying to keep clean and tidy a house where 3 young boys live in it. I'm not picking on you guys. Our house was like that as a kid. It's like trying to wash a moving car, right? Or like in our house, just the pointlessness of washing the bathroom sink. Because I know that within 10 seconds there will be red toothpaste all over that bathroom sink. Don't deny it. You see what Jesus is saying here? He's saying choose life over death. You can't live without Jesus. All the signs point you forward to Jesus. You can't live without Jesus. You can't be right with God. Kids, you need to trust Jesus as all us adults do. That's the only hope we have. But Jesus is teaching us a lesson as well. As we've said, the Pharisees are the stealth bombers to point to us good Bible folk. Where are you and I actively, in areas of our life, rejecting Jesus? Trying to clean up the room by ourselves? Trying to live without dependence on Jesus? Come tonight. That's what we're going to think about tonight. But there's another lesson here for us as we reach out, isn't it? Because it's like Jesus is losing patience with the Pharisees now. He says, you've had all the signs you're going to get, believe them. There's no excuses. Just like these Pharisees, each and every person here has heard the gospel. If we reject Jesus, it's on our own heads. Jesus said, didn't he, in another place, don't cast your pearls before swine. That's what he's saying here eventually. He's like, you can tell somebody the gospel, keep telling them the gospel, keep telling them the gospel. But some people are going to reject it. Some people are going to reject you. So these people literally saw Jesus in the flesh, literally saw him perform the signs that point to the Messiah, and still rejected him. What makes you or I think we're so special that we can convince them through our own skill? As we're going to see next week, Jesus says, preach the gospel and pray and live your life. Leave the rest up to the Lord. But it gives us great hope as well, doesn't it? Because we've seen throughout these passages the most unlikely people respond as the spirits open their hearts. But here's the thing. We've got to expect rejection. And sometimes as the most unlikely people trust Jesus, they're going to be rejected by their friends. Some of us are going to be rejected by our friends and our family for sharing the gospel, for seeking Jesus. How then do we cope? We expect rejection because forewarned is forearmed, but then secondly, Jesus says, we welcome the lonely. Because here's the thing, right? Verse 46, Jesus' family arrived, his mother and his brother, the saintly Virgin Mary. He's got brothers. What does that tell you about some doctrines of some churches, that she was always a virgin? Let the reader understand. But his mother and brothers turn up, right? In that family, your mother was like, it is for lots of people around here. Right? Mums rule the world. Right? I've just read a book by Rob Beckett, the comedian, and he was talking about the relationship between mums and dads, and he described his dad as like, he works really, really hard, and then he came in, he was a cabbie driver. He came in, and his mum stood there at the door, tapping her foot. He told her how much he'd made that day, and she said, right, you can come in. And if she didn't say that, he's back out on a cab to earn a bit more that day. Right? So many people live like that, right? Mums rule the world. But here, look, while Jesus was still talking to this crowd, his mother and brothers stood outside wanting to speak to him. Let's not miss that, right? They didn't come in. Because I tell you what, if my brother was being a prat, I'd go in. I thought he was being a prat. I'd go in and tell him, stop being a prat. Right? That's not their culture. They stay outside. They refuse to associate with him. That's Matthew's way, saying they stood outside, of showing us what Mark tells us in chapter 3, verse 21. They thought he'd gone mental. Mark's words are literally, he was out of his mind. Because Jesus was doing the very thing that the angel had told Mary you would do, she and her sons thought Jesus had gone nuts and were coming to sort him out and tell him not to carry on with this anymore. Here's the lesson, right? Expect rejection. Loving the Lord, following Jesus is going to cost. You know, we've had this picture for a few weeks now, haven't we, of Jesus coming in and redecorating and transforming the house of our lives, doing it up. Ask Dave. Redecorating a house, doing it up is not straightforward, and it always costs more than you think, even if somebody's supposed to have done it up beforehand. There's always more jobs to do. There's always going to be an extra cost. They say when you're doing a renovation, don't they? Add on 10% at least for overspend. It's not straightforward. It's going to cost us. We're going to be rejected. We're going to find relationships hard. We're going to have to make hard choices if we want to follow Jesus. That's why he said, deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me. But the lesson we've got here, isn't it? He is worth it. Something greater than the temple is here. Something greater than the prophet is here. Something greater. The one who is the Lord God, who brings his life and his beauty and his joy to us. But it's still going to cost. And for some disciples, maybe even for some of us here this morning, maybe, definitely for some people, God willing, who will get saved in our town over the coming years, it's going to cost what it cost Jesus here. The opposition, even the hatred, the awkwardness, and the loneliness of being rejected by your family. Now, by God's grace, at least two of these brothers end up writing letters in the New Testament, right? They become Christians, but at this point, as far as anyone's concerned, they're rejecting Jesus. And so Jesus here, in these verses, brings out the truth of Psalm 68, verses 5 and 6. You know Psalm 68, verses 5 and 6? The Lord is a father to the fatherless and a defender of widows. He puts the lonely in families. That's what Jesus says here, isn't it? They tell him, look, your mother and brothers are standing outside wanting to speak to you. Now, again, even more than in our culture, in that culture, mums really ruled the world. If your mum said, get out here now, you know, can I get your tea's ready kind of thing, you went. So for Jesus to say, no, actually, no, that was a shock. But to say what he says, look, verse 48, who is my mother and who is my brother? Pointing to his disciples, here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. And remember, we've seen this before in John 6, Jesus says, the will of my Father in heaven is to trust in the one who he has sent. So it's the people who are united together, trusting Jesus, one in him, adopted by the Father, brothers and sisters in Christ. He's shown us the truth that as we trust in Jesus, God, by the Spirit's power, brings us into a new family, a new humanity, a family of God. There's that unique bond of those who are one in Jesus. A couple of things before we dive into some of the details and struggles for our life in this. Perhaps some of us look at this and hate it. Perhaps because we see Jesus as pitting biological family against church family, different priorities and stuff. There's probably a couple of reasons for that. One, because I think our biological families are the number one acceptable idol of UK evangelicalism. We need to think about that perhaps further going forward. The other one is, I don't think Jesus is pitting families against each other here. spiritual and biological. What he's doing is expanding our definition of family. So if you think family is everything, Jesus says, well, your spiritual family is the same. He's not saying neglect your duties to your mother and father and your siblings or whoever, because that would be going against the fifth commandment, right? But he is saying those same duties apply to your brothers and sisters in the church. And here's what he's saying. In a world where people will be rejected for following Jesus, whether they're rejected by their friendship groups or by their work or by their family or by whoever, it is vital that we, as God's people, are a family who love and serve and give to one another, who help one another see these signs of Jesus and love him, and who welcome in the lonely and the odd and the broken, who just like us are the weak and foolish people who God has chosen to shame the wise. That's what shows the world that we're Jesus' disciples, right? John 13, love one another as I have loved you. This is how they will know that you are my disciples. So Jesus says clearly here, we are family, as the Sister Sledge said. I didn't mean to do that, it just happened. We've got to be, right? For to expect rejection, we've got to find welcome and comfort in the Lord's family. But let's not pretend that's easy. It's easy to call someone brother or sister. I've got a friend, and he said for the first few years of his Christian life, everyone used to call him brother. And he loved it until he worked out that he just couldn't remember his name, so it was a handy way of saying it. It's easy to call someone your brother or sister, right? But to actually live it is really, really hard. And some of us are finding it especially hard at the minute. Some of us have been talking, right? It's hard to be a family as a church. Now, I've just got 3 reasons why I think that's hard. They won't come up on the screen, but because there are too many different things. But let's just acknowledge, first of all, why is it hard for us to be a family at the minute? The reason one of our family isn't here this morning. We've been going through a pandemic for the last 18 months. And when we were in lockdown, we weren't allowed to be together. And as great as Zoom is or whatever, it's not the same as being together. There's a physical separation. Lockdown changed our habits. Lots of us were out and about. That was just our natural thing before Corona. Now it's like, do I go out or do I just slob and watch Netflix like I have done for the last 18 months? Or whatever. And I think the biggest thing with Corona for us is we've been living in what I'm now determined to call the permanent temporary. Everything's temporary. Everything's going to change soon. You know, we're going to get out of it. We're going to get out of it. Read on the BBC website the other day. We're going to get into endemic and life will go back to something like normal. But it's been like that for 18 months. Everything's going to change soon. And so what's the point really investing in people? Subconsciously we think, because everything will change again soon. I might not be able to see him or whatever. So let's acknowledge that part of the reason we're finding it hard to be this family at the minute is because of the circumstances we live in. That's not a reason for us not to try and push past it. But unless we acknowledge it, we won't do that. Secondly, I've never fully realised this till this week, and I'm still working out lots of the implications. As I said to Kevin at church the other night, it's blown my mind thinking about this week. Here's the thing. What I've realised thinking about this week is whenever we say the word family, we all think of different things. We all think differently about different experiences, different ways of interacting, different personalities and temperaments within ourselves or our family. And so the assumptions of what a family is, how a family interacts, because of our biological family or our friendship group or whatever, we think family and church should look like that. And when it doesn't, or when those 2 different or 15 different ways of thinking about family clash, we get problems, right? Just think about it. Just think about it in terms of different experiences in family. Was your childhood good or bad? You know, was it happy or sad? Were your parents loving or not? Or whatever else? As an adult, do you like or dislike your family? I'm making no comment, this is going on the internet. Are you a family who's really close? You spend loads of time together? Or are you a family who only ever really spend time together at Christmas and possibly on the kids' birthdays? When you think of family, do you think of your extended family, aunts and uncles and cousins and grandpas and whatever? Or do you think of just your nuclear family, those in your household? Did you grow up in a big or small family, loads of siblings? Were you a very open family? Did you share your feelings? Were you very vulnerable together, or were you very private? Are you a very loud family? Again, no comment on mine. Or are you a very quiet one? If you think we could go around and nearly every one of those, we would have a different experience of family. And that affects how we interact together. You know, is your family, extended or otherwise, is it a very diarised, organised family? Or do you just turn up at each other's houses? Is there one organiser in your family? Is your mum like a first century mum? Like she organises the entire family, else none of them would actually get in the same room together ever. Are you one of those people who, families who everything's on the WhatsApp chat? Like your WhatsApp chat goes on for hours and hours, your family WhatsApp chat. Or are you people who it's one picture of a child at Christmas. The rest of the time, you don't contact each other on that. You just spend time together. You hang out. Do you have to do activities together or do you hang out? Do you do lots of little interactions or one big one every so often? Is being with your family, here's one for me, being with your family an opportunity to vent? Like you get together in a family, it's a safe space, so you can just all moan together. That's what family is. Or are you where you just keep the peace? Is there one speaker all at once around the dinner table? Does everybody just listen to one person, or are there 15 different conversations? There's millions out there. How do you spend your free time? Do you spend it all in the same room if you're all in the house together, or do you spend it in different rooms? When we all bring different things of that makes a massive difference. Think about personality and temperament. Are you an extrovert? Are you an introvert? Are you a morning person? Are you an evening person? When you do things with people, do you have to be doing something productive together, or do you just want to slob out and relax together? There's probably about 25 things there, aren't there? And each of us will be slightly different. And I hadn't realised this week how many of those I brought the assumption that that's what family looks like. And therefore thought church family should look like. Maybe you've never thought that through. Maybe it's something for you to think through this week. We'll come on to that in a minute. The final reason, so we've got Corona, assumptions of family. Final one, it's obvious, isn't it? Sin. Be honest. Let me be brutally honest. And hopefully you can be brutally honest. At times, I don't want to invest in you lot. Especially when you want me to invest in ways that are alien and uncomfortable to me. I'm sure we could all honestly say there are times when we feel that. I want all the benefits of family without having no weird uncles, no brothers with stupid political views, and no kids screaming when you're trying to have a conversation. And nobody who eats all the potato croquettes at Christmas time. All of those things have made an impact, but here's the thing. I don't think we understand that. We don't fully think that through. We just assume that our experience is normal. But Jesus says we are family. We are one. We're there to welcome in the lonely who face rejection by the Pharisees and the other cool kids of this world as they turn to Jesus. If we want to love and serve one another, if we want to honour Jesus, if we want to help people who get saved in our town follow Jesus, we've got to be a family. But how can we, given everything we've just said? Given how different we are? Given how our assumptions are so different? What does it look like to do that? Well, you'll be glad to know, as the clock comes up to 30 minutes, that I'm not going to dig into everything about that now. Kevin and I are talking, we'll probably spend some time thinking through these next Sunday night in a bit more detail. But we've got to do the work now. We've got to think through where each of us have got to sacrifice for others now and then do it. Here's some questions to be asking yourself and one another this week. Firstly, about the last 18 months. How has Corona and lockdown and everything else, how has it changed you? How has it changed your habits and routines to be more inward-looking and less outward-looking? How has it changed your desires for a quiet, easy life in front of the telly with a glass of whiskey or a bottle of wine? How has it changed how well we know one another? Because if we only ever see each other on a screen, we don't get into the details of each other's life. Where, as hopefully we do move towards whatever endemic is and out of this pandemic a bit, where do you need to have a rethink and a reset about how we spend our times? Especially perhaps our evenings. There are 7 evenings a week. Could we give 2 of them, just 2 out of 7, to hanging out and spending time and interacting with our church family? Most of us in this church finish work relatively early. Could you do tea with people? By tea, I mean Yorkshire tea, not Yorkshire tea, if you see what I mean. Not a cup of tea, tea. Food, right? Could you do tea with people a couple of times a week, regularly? Personally, I would say we've been rubbish at getting back into being organised and organising time with people. Because in Corona, you didn't have to do that. You didn't have to think about the future, right? It was just like, nobody knows. Perhaps all of us need to have a rethink. Secondly, how do your experiences and your interactions with your biological family and friends shape how you interact with your spiritual family? Like I said, I've literally never thought about this before this week, not properly enough. Ask yourself the questions. How about how you judge whether they love and invest in you? Because if I think love and interaction and everything else is shown in a specific way and people don't do that, I might think they don't love me. Maybe it's just that for them, they have no category for that. How might you need to learn to show love and welcome to others in ways that feel alien to you, to me, but that help others know that experience of welcome and love? Where might we need to chill out that not everyone shows love how you do or I do, and appreciate that people are trying to make an effort in other ways? Let me give a personal example again. I have no category, and I didn't actually really even know this until this week, that some people can have proper conversations by text. I was like, what? Johnny said to me this week, I've got friends who I only ever text. Never met them. I was like, what? Is that even that can't be a thing. Like, people say to me, I spoke to so-and-so this week. Oh, did you? Yeah, by text. And my immediate reaction is, so you've not spoken to him then? Because I have no category for that. I could take you through the text for all of my extended family and me. I literally scrolled through one with my brother today. And he doesn't live near. He lives however 200 miles away, whatever it is. Literally was, does Jude want this for his birthday? Happy birthday. Happy Christmas. Mum says, what do you want for Christmas dinner? That's literally it. The same kind of things for 4 years. And mine was like, no, yes, thanks. And yet some of you text and expect answers. I've got to work. I've got to realise that I might have to have a conversation by text. That freaks me out. I can't believe I'm saying this. But if I want to show love to other people, I've got to do that. Maybe for some of us, it's realising that there are those in this church who, if you're not in the same room, you don't exist, in one sense. And maybe we need to work hard at getting out and about and spending time together, so that we're loving one another. Look and think about your experiences. Let's quickly finish. Finally, that sin. Just ask that question. Where is your selfishness keeping you from sacrificing for the sake of others? Whereas your feelings of self-pity or self-righteousness or even self-preservation stopping you welcoming and loving the lonely. Ask the questions this week. Again, we'll ask some of them next week. But where's Corona changed you? What about your assumptions of family? What about sin? How can each of us grow in loving and serving one another? Perhaps like me, your first reaction to all of this is a long list of how other people need to change in order to love and welcome me and others from our community. Folks, that's the wrong answer. I don't like saying that, but it is. Ultimately, you and I can't change whether others love and welcome us or other people. And here's the thing, none of us will answer to the Lord for how other people do this. But we will for ourselves. We can work at welcoming others. After all, that's what Jesus did, right? He went to those who rejected him, us. And he loved us literally to death when all we responded with was get lost. Until he opened our eyes and our hearts and brought us to himself. And we still do it every day. As we tell him he's not allowed upstairs to redecorate that part of our lives. And he did that we might be welcomed into the love and family of the Father. So all I can do is work by God's grace, sacrificing to love and welcome others. All you can do is the same, and pray for others to catch the bug as we seek to live out an example of what it might look like. Look, folks, when we live in a generation that will be condemned by the men of Nineveh, will be condemned by the Queen of Sheba, will even be condemned by Sodom and Gomorrah. Check out chapter 10, verse 15. A world where self-help, that sweeping the house clean and making it look like nobody lives there, that is literally the spirit of our age. Check out self-help books on Amazon. You'll be there a long time. How will we, who by God's grace have seen the signs and become one in Jesus, how will we welcome our brothers and sisters? Welcome in. Be a family for the lonely. And declare to the world that in Jesus, by the Spirit's power, the Lord puts the lonely in families. What will you do? What will I do this week by God's grace? That he might bring glory to his name and he might bring his family to himself. Let's pray.